very Casanova. The elections were held across the country. There were several states, at least two that we're talking about. One is Virginia that went Republican. The other is New Jersey that was a solidly blue state that looks very competitive. I think that the Democratic governor there will finally pull it out. But it's not really that surprising when a president's approval ratings are low. Then the party, the candidate that represents his party generally does poorly. Ekes one out and oftentimes loses. That's not surprising. What also is not surprising is the tactics used. No matter what happens in America, when things get tough, always bet on black. Always. Always bet on the fact that people will respond to you casting aspersions about black people. They just do. The Republican Party, after Barry Goldwater did, they enacted the Southern strategy, which exists now. We have Ronald Reagan, who talked about welfare careers and made up a character who had 80 fake names and 30 IDs and made $110,000 a year. And people believed that it was part of the takers, that we were a group of takers. So there has been an effort, an effective effort, to cast us as other. It has always worked. Even George W. Bush's father, who was, he was a decent enough man, but even he ran the Willie Horton ad, which made white people afraid of criminality. What'll happen if black people move in our neighborhoods? Look, we let them run them up. It is interesting that in a country that yells freedom, one of the things it insists on having is control over black people. Control. The elections of 2020 scared them to the extent that now they made it much tougher for black people to vote. They redistricted things that made it much tougher for people to have a political foothold. When things get tough, you always bet on black. You always bet that you can conjure up the notion and the specter of fear, and then it will have a level of efficacy. It always has. It always has. Critical race is not even taught in schools at all. It's not taught till college. But you don't have to make a truth up. Just conjure up the specter of black people wanting something, the specter of them trying to do something, the specter of what will happen to them. And then you have somebody like Condoleezza Rice who will mention it on The View, and that gives it credence. That gives it the credibility. Critical race theory is not taught in school, but it does not need to be true. All it has to do is be about black people. That's all it has to do. And it will score. It will register. And I don't care how effectively government, the fact that now, 6 months later, millions of Americans have been lifted out of poverty in a very short time because of some of the actions that have been taken on the Democratic side. Millions. Nope, that ain't what we're talking about. We're talking about critical race. And that's the battle cry, because they know in the end, you conjure up the specter of black people doing something and it will work. First, they said that you were coming for their woman, and that worked. Then they said you were coming for their jobs, and that worked. Then they said you wanted to live next to them, and that worked. Then they said you wanted to brainwash their children, and that worked. Because all you have to do is conjure up the specter of black people, and you will always win. And they know it. They know it consistently. Make them afraid of something that they're trying to take from you. We talk about freedom, but in most states in this country, legislators can control the way black people wear their hair. They won't protect black people having the freedom to wear their hair they want to. They'll let employers and school districts and municipalities tell them how to wear their hair. In most places in this country, before COVID and mask mandates, it was illegal to cover your face. Why? In most places in this country, after the election that Donald Trump lost, they made it harder for black people to vote. Why? And all you have to do is conjure up the specter of black people wanting something, of them doing something, of them being something. I have said it before, and I will say it again. The most dangerous place for black people to live is in the imagination of white people. Because in that imagination, it is so stark and frightening and fearful, you can call on it every time. And every time you need a political result, it is tried and true. Always bet on black. That's a little note from the GED section. Got the Jazz Report coming up in 15 minutes. It's the Hughley Show.